what does it mean when it says, that's an X. What does it mean when it says XZ like that?
The total.
The length. So if you don't remember, when there's no line above it, it means the length of a segment. All right, so from X to Y is 14. From Y to Z is 27. So what do we need to do to find the length of X to Z? Add them together. 14 and, what was the other number? 27, which makes?
41.
It is 41. Thank you, Griffin. So the length of XZ is 41. I don't know if we talked about it yesterday in class about whether or not you needed to show the work. Did we talk about that? Here's my only thought. It is super simple work that you can literally plug in your calculator, right? Here's what happens. You have a for function which doesn't show the whole line. Like it won't show 14 and 27 at the same time, right? So if you don't show me what you did and you maybe typed it in wrong, maybe you hit the minus sign or maybe you did something crazy, I won't be able to give you any partial credit. Does that make sense? So like you won't have any points taken off for not showing me the work, but if you happen to type something in wrong, I have nothing to like give points for. That's my only word of advice. I would just make sure you're typing in correctly or check yourself. Maybe do it twice. Are there any questions on this first one? Wonderful. The second, so we want to find the length of CD. The full line is from B to D is 25. From B to C is 19. How do I find CD? Subtract. 25 minus 19 is? 6. The length of CD is 6. All right, letter C. Why are we going to do this? What is the name of today's notes, today's lesson? Midpoint distance. Today we're going to talk about midpoints, and in order to find the midpoint, you're going to find the middle, right? How do you find the middle between two numbers? Add them and divide by 2, which is the same thing as averaging. So if you got a 76 and a 92 on a test, on 2 tests, you would add them, right? And then we're going to end up dividing them by 2. This is the same process you will do for a midpoint. What is 76 plus 92? Correct. 168. And then divide by 2, that would be an 84%, which means 84 is the midpoint, if you will, between a 76 and a 92. All right, so let's talk about some terms, and then we're going to math. All right? So starting with the basics, like the word midpoint. Well, here's what you're going to write. A midpoint bisects, B-I-S-E-C-T, bisects a segment, into 2 congruent segments. Bisects a segment into 2 congruent segments. It can be a lot to write, or you can abbreviate. What is the symbol for congruent? What does it look like?
Equal sign.
With a squiggle on top. Good. So a squiggle with an equal sign. So, but it's bisects a segment into 2 congruent segments. Most of you are in biology, yes? Okay, what word sounds like bisect? Dissect. When you dissect, what do? You like cut it open, right? And then you look at stuff, interesting. But bisect, you are also going to cut. You're going to cut into half. That's what it means 2. So cut into 2. I do believe somewhere on there you also have the word bisect, which is what is going to pop up next. It's like 3 bullet points down, maybe 2. I don't know. A bisect, you could say cuts a segment or angle into 2 congruent parts. So you could say cuts, or you could say divide if you want. But cuts a segment or an angle into 2 congruent parts. So that is like the second bullet point. To bisect is to cut a segment or an angle into 2 congruent parts. So cuts a segment or an angle into 2 congruent parts. Under the word midpoint, it says it's the blank between 2 points. There are 2 words I want you to write. You can guess one of them. A midpoint is the middle between 2 points. But it is also the average between 2 points. So I want you to write both. You can put middle / average between 2 points. So that blank beneath midpoint, it is the middle / average between 2 points. Nope, right here.
Oh.
It's okay. We are, yep, there you go. Middle slash average between 2 points. All right. So in geometry, you can't say it looks like the midpoint, so it's the midpoint. You have to have some sort of proof. What on my screen tells me that M is my midpoint? Don't overthink it. Not because it's in the middle. Don't overthink it.
It's labeled M for mid.
No. What is it?
The point?
No.
M is the middle.
It says what, Isla?
It says M is
It says M is the midpoint. That doesn't mean it's in the middle, though. You can't say it looks like it or it's called M. You have to have proof. So this would be proof number 1, is if it said M is the midpoint. The second bit of proof is actually on your paper. If you look on your paper, you have these dashes, right? Those dashes are congruent marks. Go ahead and label them on your paper. Those are called congruent marks. So those dashes are congruent marks. Congruent marks. So that means whatever the length of AB is, segment AB will be congruent to segment MB. So give me a number, any number under the sun.
6.
Sure. If AM, its length was 6, the length of MB would also be 6, which would mean the full length of the line is 12. So keep that practice in mind. The last thing we write down and then we start naming them is a segment bisector. A segment bisector is a segment, ray, line, or plane that intersects a segment at its midpoint. There's nothing I can do to shorten it. That's it. That's right there. So your last term blank, a segment bisector is a segment, ray, line, or plane that intersects a segment at its midpoint. So it is a segment, ray, line, or plane that intersects a line at its midpoint.
What goes right there?
It's the average or middle between 2 points. So a segment, ray, line, or plane that intersects a segment at its midpoint. So right now, what cuts this segment in half? Don't overthink it. M. How do I know it's point M?
Told us.
Because these tick marks, right? This means that M is in the middle. It means that whatever length AM is, MB is also the same. What about now? What's in the middle? What's cutting this in half? It's a line, right? So you would just name it like a line. Could I use the word line to name this line?
Yeah.
What do you need?
Alright, no.
You would need a lowercase letter, right? Do we have a lowercase letter? No. So you would name it with the arrows, right? And then how many points?
2.
2 points. Does it matter which 2?
No.
No. Okay, so this one shows CD. You could say MD, MC, anything like that. All right, so we're going to use that and do example 1. We're going to go through and first decide what's the segment bisector, and then second decide what the length of AB is. This is at the bottom of your page. This first one, what is the only thing that's in the middle of this segment? M. So guess what the segment bisector is? Is M.
Wait.
So a segment bisector is something that cuts the line in half. The only thing that's cutting this line in half is a point, and it's M. The second thing we're going to do is find the length of AB. From A to M is 13. So what's the other portion? 13. So we want AB, right?
Yes.
So from A to B would be 26. So both are your answers. So you want to end up circling both, or boxing both, highlighting both, however you want to do it. The second, it's not just a point in the middle of the line, right? And now it's a type of line. What kind of line is it?
Right.
It's a ray. When we name a ray, what does the symbol look like?
Arrow to the right.
Arrow to the right. Now look, how many points are on here?
2.
There's 2. So we all see C. We all see C. M is the other one. Why is there not a dot there? It's just understood. Whenever you have 2 lines that intersect, they're not going to put a dot. They're just going to be understood. All right, so we could say we're naming a ray. What's my first letter going to be? M, and then C. Then you want to find the length of AB. What do we think from A all the way to B? 16 is correct. All right, and then the last one. What is in the middle of our line? for our segment here?
Line.
It's a line. How do we name it? Line L. Could I have used arrows, like the line with arrows? No. Well, there's not no points. There's one point. What's the only point here? M, but we don't have a second point. All right, so we had to use line L. And then the length of AB, we know this is 26, so the other portion has to be 26. And 26 plus 26 is 52. Perfect. When you're ready, go ahead and turn the page. Now we do a little bit of algebra. All right, point M is the midpoint of VW. Our end goal, we're going to find the length of VM. But I know that M is the midpoint for two reasons. What's one reason? The dashes. What's my second reason? It tells us that it's the midpoint, right? So if it's the midpoint, that means the length of VM is equal to the length of MW. We agree?
Yes.
So what is the length of VM? 4x minus 1. And we know it will be equal to whatever the length of MW is. What is the length of MW? 3x plus 3. So now you just have an algebra problem. Remember that I always move the smallest x first. You can choose however you want to do it. But what is the smallest x here? 3x. So how do I move positive 3x to the other side? Subtract it. 4x minus 3x is x, and I drop down the minus 1, and it equals 3. My last step, add 1, and x equals, do not circle it. Did it ask what x was? No. Our goal is to find the length of VM. All right, so at the beginning, the length of VM was what? 4 times x minus 1. We agree? 4 times x minus 1. We know what x is now, don't we? So we can plug it in. 4 times 4 minus 1. 4 times 4 is? 16 minus 1 is? So the length of VM is 15. I do want you to label it because eventually you'll have multiple things. Like it might ask you for MW, might ask you for VW. You want to make sure that you have it labeled. What is a way I could check my work? You could plug it in the other side. What should the other side equal? 15 as well, right? When I plug in 4, 3 times 4 is? 12 plus 3 is 15. So that worked out. Questions on this? Okay, now we move on. All right, I'm going to teach you two ways to find a midpoint on a line. All right? I'm going to teach you one way to do it in your head and then the formula way. All right? A midpoint is a what kind of point? Where is it?
Middle.
In the middle. So let's do some brain work for a second. Let's say we had 2 points. Give me some even numbers.
2 and 4.
2 and 4.
6 and 8.
You're my third class today, and every single class has chosen those numbers. I don't know why, but that's it. So to find the midpoint, the middle, the x will be the middle of the other two x's. All right, so what is the middle between 2 and 6? 4. The y will be the middle of the y's. So what is in the middle of 4 and 8? 6. I will show it to you on our graph. You don't have to graph it on yours. I'm just showing you. For 2, 4, I'll go to the right 2 and then up 4, right? This is, what do we want to label the first one? M. Well, let's use M for midpoint. Sorry. Y. Sounds good. All right, what's my next point? My midpoint was 4, 6. So over 1, 2, 3, 4. Up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll say this is 6. Here's my midpoint. All right, and then the last one was, bless you, 6, 8. So over 5, we'll say that this is 6. And then up 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this is where we'll call it Z. Ta-da! So there is a formula that you can use. And if you want to use it, you surely can. But sometimes it's really easy just to do it in your head. All right? The formula if you don't know, if you don't like the method I just showed you, you take the x's, and you can write this down. You would take the x's and add them and divide them by 2. So you have a blank, says midpoint formula. We'll just have you fill it in. You would have 2 points to find the middle between them. One of the points you would call x1, y1, and the other one you would call x2, y2. And then the formula looks like this. You add the x's, divide by 2, and then you add the y's and divide by 2. So go ahead and write that in your box. Add the x's, divide by 2, add the y's, and divide by 2. So we're going to do the same kind of question, but with the formula. So take the x's. What are the x's of these 2 coordinate points? What are the x's?
2 and 6.
2 and 6. What is 2 plus 6?
8.
8. Divide by 2, and that is 4. What did we say this was? It was 4, right? Same thing with the y's. Take the y's. What are the 2 y's of 4 and 8? 4 plus 8 is 12. Divide by 2, and that is 6. So we would get the same answer, just a little more work. So however you want to do it. If you have odd numbers, it is easier to do the formula, because sometimes you'll end up with a half. Like, not this one. Do you want to try this one? You try it on your paper. So just off the side somewhere. It is in the middle of the picture. So try not to use the picture itself, because you won't have a picture most of the time. But use the method. We have -1, 8. And then we have 5, 2. So you can either use the formula, or you could use, the method. Do you have an answer already?
Yes.
All right. What do we think is in the middle of -1 and 5? Well, if I picked 4, I would be 1 away here, and I would be 5 away here. It would be what?
2.
It would be 2. All right, because I'd be 3 away from -1, and I would be 3 away from 5. All right, so you have to be the same space from each of them. And then what do you think it would be for the y's? What is in the between 8 and 2? Is 5. Because 5 is 3 away from 8, and it's also 3 away from 2. All right, we're going to still use the formula method right here, because we're going to have an odd number. All right, so let's go ahead and write it down. I don't require you to write down the formula whenever you're testing. However, when you're still learning it, I do find it helpful to help you learn the formula. So while you're learning it, while you're doing like homework and stuff, I would write down the formula so that you can have it memorized by the time you quiz or test. All right, so let's start with the x's and work our way from there. What are the 2 x's?
1 and 4.
Yeah, 1 and 4. All right, so 1 and 4. What's 1 plus 4? 5. I dropped down the 2. Does this reduce any further? No. You can leave it like that if you wish, but that's harder to graph. We're going to graph it in a second. What is 5 over 2 as a mixed number?
2 over
2.5, yeah. All right, and then we're going to find the y-coordinate. What are the 2 y's we're going to use?
-3 and 2.
-3 and 2. -3 plus 2 is? -1. Does that reduce any further? No. So that's the midpoint. You can go ahead and box it. This graph is just here to show you why the answer is so ugly. So let's start with graphing R. Remember that every coordinate is an x and a y, right? What if my x is positive? Where would we go?
I meant to the right.
To the right, and then if my x is negative, then you go
To the left.
to the left. If y is positive, you go.
Up.
And if it's negative, you go. All right, so from the origin, we have 1 as my x. So am I going to go left or right?
Right.
To the right, and then it's -3 for y. So down 3. Label it R. We can label S as well. So it's 4, 2. A positive 4 means we're going to go to the left or to the right.
Right.
To the right, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then positive 2 means up 2. Go ahead and use a straight edge. You have like a lanyard on right now. It's a straight edge. I would use a straight edge to draw this because you're going to see how perfectly our midpoint is on this line. Right? Our midpoint is 2.5, negative 0.5. So from the origin, I will go to the right, right? Wait a second. You're going to go over 1, 2, and a half of a box. And then we're going to go down how much? Another half of a box. So you should find that it fits perfectly right here, right? 2 full boxes and then a half. And then half of another box. And that is where our midpoint is. So in this case, it probably wouldn't have been easier to do the other method. All right. That's it. We can go back to these. There's one more thing you learn as an honor student. And I'm going to teach you both ways. There's an algebra way, and then there's a non-algebra way. All right? I'm going to show you the algebra way first. So, in order to find the x of the midpoint, what did we do? Added what? I added my x's divided by 2, right? This portion of the formula gave me the x of my midpoint. We agree? Go ahead and write it down. We're going to separate that formula into 2 separate equations so that we can solve. So x of the midpoint, I put MP. Technically, you would put x with a subset of m. Most people don't like to look at that. So x of the midpoint, however you want to write it. So do we know the x of our midpoint in this problem? It says the midpoint of JK is M, it's 2, 1. One endpoint is J, 1, 4. Find the coordinates of endpoint K. So in this case, we're not finding the midpoint, we already have it. So we're going to use the midpoint to find what we're missing. That make sense? What is the x of my midpoint? 2. So you're going to plug in 2 for the x of my midpoint. All right? And then you would have your 2 x's, your endpoints, right? Add them together, divide by 2. But how many endpoint x's do we have? We only have one of them. What is the x of our endpoint? 1. Do we know the other one? No. So we're going to call it x. We don't know it. We want to find it. That's what it's asking us. We have our midpoint. We have our endpoint. We need to find the other endpoint. All right, so now it's just algebra. What will we do first in this problem? So we want to get x by itself, right? Yeah. X and plus 1 are attached to each other. So we need to get rid of this division. So the opposite of dividing by 2 is multiplying times 2. So both sides, we're going to multiply times 2. On the left, we have 2 times 2, which is 4. And that equals 1 plus x. And then my last step, minus 1. Yeah. And then 4 minus 1 is 3. So of our new coordinate, which is endpoint K, we know we have a 3 as the x. We're going to do the same thing with the y's. Do we have any questions about this first? Okay. How did we find the y of the midpoint? What did we use to find the y? What part of the formula?
Y1 plus Y2 divided.
Same thing, just with y's, right? So in this problem, we know the y of the midpoint, and it is 1. And then we're given a y. What is the y of the endpoint we're given? 4. So same process, same idea. I need to get rid of that division, that dividing by 2. So the opposite of dividing by 2, multiplying by 2, multiply both sides by 2. 2 times 1 is 2 equals 4 plus y. Subtract 4 and y equals negative 2. Go ahead and circle it or box it, however you want to indicate. I'm going to show you the simpler way to do it. You can do it either way. And you're probably going to hate the way we just did it because the way we're going to do it is very simple. All right, so we had an endpoint, which was J, right? And it was 4, no, what was it? It was 1, 4. Right, here's our endpoint. We have our midpoint, which was 2, 1. So you can use the same process as before to find the endpoint. So look at the midpoint. My x midpoint is 2. It went down 1, right? To get to 1. So it would need to go up 1 to be the same distance apart. So our x would have been 3. Would you look at that? It was. And then 1 to 4, it went up how many? 3. So it would go down 3. So what is?
-2.
Yeah. Which is the same answer we got. You can do it either way. Doesn't matter to me. Are we okay? Okay. That's the end for today. You're going to take out a whiteboard marker and a whiteboard. So you have a whiteboard under your desk or around you? Sarah, can you see if my key is in my lock back there? Was that a yes or a no? It's unfortunate if it's a no. All right, so the first one, some of you are saying M. Is there only a point in the middle? So it's not M. It's this whole thing, right? Can I call it MD?
No.
No, why not? D's lowercase letter, it's not a point. Okay, so how do you name it? Line D. That is the segment bisector. Then you want to find the length of AB. So we know AM is 15. What's the length of MB? 15. So A to B is 30. So this is what your answer should look like. So you're going to try the second one if you haven't already. Okay? Correct. Correct. Not quite. Correct. Correct. Half is correct. Half is the second half. Half is correct. Correct. Thank you. Okay. Not quite. Correct. All right, so for the second one, the number one thing I'm seeing, look. A lot of people are calling this a line. Does it go infinitely in two directions? No, so it's not a line. It is a ray, which we name with a arrow to the right. What's the first letter L we use? M, and then L, and then AB is 11. 5.5 plus 5.5 is 11. All right, here are the next two. All right, so I'll take this one.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. This is like our example on the second page. this part's good. But you can't just double it. Gotta plug it in. Correct. So your naming is not correct, but also the length. That's a 7.
Yeah.
That's what X is, it's not what the length of the line is. So you plugged it into SM. I want ST, right? You're almost done. So you also plugged it into SM. And you plugged it into MT. But I want from ST. So you're this close to the answer. Did you have pi about it? Oh, I see. You are correct.
Let's go. Oh my God.
You're almost there. Correct. You are correct. 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 I think so. All right, so let's talk about the first one. So you can check yours if you haven't already. What do we do here? What do we do?
You gotta get it right now.
We set them equal, right? Okay. What do we get for x? 2. You don't just double it. What are we gonna do with this x? Plug it in. So a lot of people are plugging it in here and then saying the answer is 14. But x plus 12 only represents SM. We want ST. So you could plug it in the other side. What's 8 times 2? 8 times 2? Minus 2 is 14. So 14 and 14 make 28. So ST equals 28. Okay, go ahead and try the second one if you haven't already. And then what's the segment bisector? So you had classwork yesterday. If you finished this question, but you should show me it. I have. Do you see yours?
I thought so, because I put it up for that, but I couldn't.
Can you rewrite it?
Huh?
Almost. Not quite. Good. And then what's the segment bisector? Good. And then segment bisector. What cuts the segment in half? Good. Fingers What's this cake?
Oh, whoops.
Almost. You plugged it into 1/2, right? Correct. Correct. All right, so we set them equal. 2x plus 3, focus, equals 4x minus 7. Then x equals, what do we end up with? X equals 5. Then what do we do with it? Plug it in. So 2 times 5 is, plus 3 is 13. So that means this piece is 13, which means this piece is 13. So the length of ST is 26. You're good. All right, go ahead and do the next question. So make sure you come back to this, Braden.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, you had that. And you should plug it in. Do you have a board?
Oh,
Well, you just ask for one. Come on. You learned this today with us. You can do this with us. You just borrow one. Just give it back when you're done. Close. Oh, okay. Sorry. Let me see it again. Yeah, that's it. Make sure you put parentheses. First one's good. I haven't done the second one yet. Okay. What did you have there, Sam? Samuel?
For the first one?
But just show me the second one. You had it. You have it up there. It's good. It's good. It's good. 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 Remember, you're finding the middle, right? That's good. You can use either method. You can use the math method or you can use your brain methods. Both are good. Good. Oh, that's good.
Oh, okay.
You just gotta circle it.
Oh.
I thought you had the 9.
How do you use this method?
So I usually put a space between. So I would bring these. I shouldn't see it. You want to find the middle between these two. So it's a little harder with the negative, but I would start with any number you think. Like I would start with a 4. How far apart are 4 and a 9? 5. How far apart are 4 and negative 3? They're 7 apart. So they're not exact. So we want to be closer to that number, right? So I would go a little bit closer to that number. So should this number go up or down? Should be closer to negative 3. Down. So I would try a 3. How far is 3 from 9? 6. And how far is 3 from negative 3? Yeah, so that's the same distance apart. This one is a little harder. There isn't a middle between 2, right? 2 and 2. There's just going to be 2. Correct. Correct. Why didn't you divide by 2? Correct. Good. 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 Yep. Yes. Sorry, I shouldn't see it. All right, so the first one we got 3, 2. And the second one we got 4, 4. We have one more slide. I think this is our last. No. We already did this one. We'll just pause here.